What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Too Good for Theaters video. Today we're going to be breaking down another NFL prospect draft profile, this being the tackle out of Minnesota, Aireontae Ersery. So let's get right into it. So taking a look at Ersery here, he is 23 years old, around 6'6" in height, 330 pounds, and he spent 5 years at the University of Minnesota. And he really did remind me a lot of a guy like Darnell Wright. Of course, Darnell Wright last year, Tennessee. He is a little shorter than Darnell Wright, but around the same in terms of their weight, stuff like that. And he really did kind of spring off the page in terms of his speed, especially for his weight. And he really is one of the better, or I would say quickest linemen in terms of his straight on speed. And I'll go over later in his 40 time, but he actually had a 5-second flat 40-yard dash and actually ranked him in the 90th percentile among offensive linemen. So I would say that Ersery is kind of one of these perfect fits for these modern NFL offenses, these kind of stretch zone blocking schemes where he played a lot of that in college, where he more so really developed under this zone blocking scheme. And with his quickness, he can get out on breaks and lead blocks downfield. He really is the kind of perfect, ideal tackle candidate for a lot of these teams. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he's kicked inside to guard and whether or not his strength is going to be able to kind of hold up on the outside there. But this quickness is certainly going to be an explosive weapon for Ersery, and it's a reason why he is one of the better rated offensive linemen in this year's draft class, along with his upper body technique. Scouts really kind of raved about this. He has very good hand placement. Of course, his arm size is probably adequate for a tackle, not necessarily in the elite percentile by any means. He probably has around average arm size for tackles here, and he's not like one of these shorter arm tackles that I've kind of delved into earlier on the channel here. But it is a little interesting to see why scouts have kind of deemed his lower body technique to be his quote-unquote weakness thus far in his kind of grade thus far, considering the fact that he does have very good lower body speed. Like I said before, he slides very smoothly. The scouts have kind of noticed that he plays a little bit too upright, and he does have to bend a little bit in terms of his knee placement to really help him kind of deal with some of these edge rushers who can kind of use those up and under moves, stuff like that, and really get underneath where Ersery kind of thrives, which is his upper body strength. So it is a little weird, though, because he does struggle getting out of his blocks sometimes, and his acceleration does hurt him a little bit when getting out on stretch plays. And that was something that a scout in particular noticed, that he's not the greatest at stretch plays, which is interesting because he does have a lot of speed. So what I kind of identified from that was him getting out of his blocks quicker. He needs to be better at acceleration, and he just has to have better footwork in terms of getting out of some of these lead blocks and gaining downfield. But if he is able to kind of really harness his lower body technique, you can match that with his upper body technique and his really good hand placement along with his speed. He has the potential to be one of the better tackles in this year's draft class. And a lot of people say that he could be a right tackle in this class, and he's probably better suited to be a right tackle, which I do agree with. However, he did play a lot of left tackle in college, so he can certainly be a left tackle, and he certainly has the strength to play left tackle. So if he does harness that lower body technique, and maybe this is a guy where you start him off at right tackle, and once he gets kind of filled in with the position, kind of gets that technique down, you maybe switch him over to the left side, and he could be one of the better left tackles coming out of this year's draft class. And it's certainly going to be interesting, especially with how he is really accustomed to this zone blocking scheme. He can certainly fit in a lot of these modern NFL offenses in terms of having that stretch zone, kind of side-to-side running, where it's not more so north-south, it's east-west. And especially with some of the backs and the speed that Ersery really has, he can kind of be that perfect left tackle or right tackle that can get down the field and kind of spring these lead blocks that lead to these explosive plays. But taking a look at his 2024 statistics here, he actually played in 12 games. He had an offensive grade of 77.5, a pass block grade of 77.3, and a run block grade of 73.6. He gave up 12 pressures, 10 hurries, 1 QB hit, 1 sack, and he was penalized 3 times. However, I would say that the majority, or actually a third of the pressures that he gave up actually occurred in one game. And of course, it was a game that he did give up a sack, which was against Michigan. So that is a little bit of an outlier game. And I would say that he played a lot better against some of the better competition, except for Michigan. He had a very good showing against Abdul Carter, stuff like that. And really that one Michigan game kind of dragged these stats down a little bit here. But I also wanted to take a look into his blocking schemes, and he tended to play a lot more zone blocking in terms of the run game at Minnesota. He actually took 157 zone blocking snaps, which accounted for at least 58% of the run blocking snaps that he was on the field for, compared to his gap blocking, which he only took 91 snaps at, which was around 33%. So he is more accustomed to that zone blocking fit. And of course, we know that Josh McDaniels tends to run a little more gap in his scheme. So that would have to be something that he would have to kind of become more accustomed to. However, with Doug Marrone and Josh McDaniels on your staff, along with Dante Scarnecchia apparently consulting this offensive line department with the Patriots, I think that he would have no issue with his vague familiarity with gap blocking already, switching over to that, really having that be his main technique. I would see that there would be really no issue with Ersery kind of picking up that gap blocking technique. But I also wanted to take a look into some of his combine numbers. I kind of alluded to it before. He actually ran a 5-second flat 40 time. His 10-yard dash was at least 1.75 seconds, so very good in terms of that category. He actually took 25 bench reps, and his 20-yard shuttle was 4.82 seconds. And he ranked pretty well in his athleticism score across the combine, and he is one of the better athletically gifted linemen in this year's draft class. So it's going to certainly be interesting whether or not Ersery is going to be one of these later first-round tackles, or probably where he's going to end up fitting is that second round. And we'll see if the Patriots are able to take a flyer on him. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this video here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below of whether or not you think Ersery will be a second or a potential first-round pick in this draft class, and whether or not he'd be a good fit for the Patriots. And hopefully, I'll check you all out in the next one.